Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Melissa stared into the kitchen cabinet without focus. It wasn't hunger, it was emptiness. That feeling of being physically present, but mentally gone. The sound of the kettle in the background pulled her out of the daze. She turned off the stove, but didn't even pour the tea. She just sat down and rested her elbows on the table. Bradley was in the bedroom, lying down, not saying a word for over an hour. Ever since the argument the previous afternoon, the silence between them felt like an unspoken agreement, as if both were saving energy so they wouldn't say something they couldn't take back. He had planned a surprise. He booked an expensive restaurant, wore a pressed shirt, put on cologne, and said he wanted a night just for the two of them. Melissa didn't react badly. She just found it strange. After all, he hadn't worked in months, and every dollar was carefully watched. When they got to the restaurant, she noticed the place was fancy, with crystal glasses and perfectly folded napkins. The kind of place they avoided even when they were doing well financially. They sat down, ordered wine, picked dishes that seemed more like names than actual food. Bradley smiled, trying to hide his anxiety. And she smiled back, trying to figure out what this all meant. The dinner felt more like a rehearsed scene than a real moment. Between sips of wine, he talked about how things were going to get better, about opportunities he was looking into, about a possible job lead a friend had mentioned. Melissa listened, but it was like she'd heard it all before. The speech repeated itself with slight variations, but the ending was always the same, hope hanging on vague promises. When dessert arrived, Melissa leaned forward a bit and said she needed to be honest. She asked why he'd spent so much money on a dinner when the household bills were already late. Bradley dropped the smile instantly. He said he just wanted to do something special. That he wanted to show he could still give her something good. She replied that the effort would have meant more if he'd helped with the weekly groceries. And that's when the night fell apart. Both looked down. The food lost its flavor. The waiter came by and asked if everything was okay, and Bradley waved him off vaguely. It was obvious nothing was okay. On the way home, they stayed silent. In the car, the engine noise filled the empty space where conversation should have been. Melissa looked out the window, trying to understand why this gesture, which could have been sweet, now felt like a burden. And Bradley gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling like his failure was now measured by the way she looked at him. When they got home, each went to a different room. They didn't argue. They didn't touch. They just ended the night like someone closing a book without caring how it ends. In the days that followed, Melissa threw herself into work with more intensity. She stayed late, took on extra tasks, avoided coming home early. At home, everything ran on autopilot. She cooked, cleaned, organized. And he spent his days in front of the computer, saying he was sending out resumes. They lived under the same roof, but felt like guests. Their interactions were limited to practical questions. Are you going to the market? Did the electricity bill come due? Have you seen the mail? One Saturday afternoon, she was sitting on the couch with the monthly expense spreadsheet open on her laptop. She needed to figure out where the gaps were. That's when she saw the $400 transaction on the card, with the restaurant's name. That confirmed what she already felt: the dinner wasn't a gift, it was desperation. A silent cry trying to get back something that might have already left. She closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and tasted bitterness in her mouth. It wasn't regret. It was exhaustion. She remembered when, early in their marriage, they'd save up coins just to order a pizza and share one soda with laughter. Back then, happiness didn't come from how much things cost, but from the lightness of being together. And now, even with an expensive dinner, the only thing she felt was a weight in her chest. The memory of those old moments came like a painful contrast to what they were living now. It felt like mourning something that hadn't died all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. Bradley noticed something had changed, but he didn't know what. Melissa was different, more distant, less patient. But he was used to dealing with that by staying quiet. He avoided conversations, dodged eye contact, hid behind excuses. When people asked about her, he said she was too busy with work. When people asked about him, he changed the subject. They pretended everything was fine for others, but deep down, both knew all that was left was the surface. One night, as she lay down, Melissa stared at the ceiling for a long time. She felt an inexplicable tightness, like she was trapped in a life that wasn't hers anymore. And Bradley, lying beside her, pretended to sleep, but listened to her heavy breathing and short sighs. No one moved. It was like even their bodies had learned to keep their distance. And in that early morning, without saying a word, each in their own way, understood they were only together by address. Because emotionally, they'd left each other long ago. Bradley started paying more attention to Melissa. He noticed the small things, the way she smiled when reading something on her phone, how she got ready before going to work even if it was just a simple meeting. Things that used to go unnoticed now carried weight. She was more present outside the house than inside. The conversations, already rare, became automatic. And her absence, even when she was nearby, started to hurt more than the long silences. On a regular Monday, she came home later than usual. She said she stayed late dealing with issues involving a new coworker who had just joined the team. Bradley listened, nodded, and went back to watching the news on TV. But he remembered the name. Brian. In the following days, that name came up more often in her conversations. She mentioned Brian was very efficient, funny, helpful. That the team was getting more organized now. Slowly, the mentions stopped being professional and took on a more personal tone. A comment about the music he played in his car, about the restaurant he recommended, about the way he kindly offered her a ride when her phone died. Each sentence was another piece in a puzzle Bradley was putting together in silence. On the following Wednesday, Melissa left her phone on the living room table before going to take a shower. Bradley looked at the device and hesitated for a moment. But the hesitation didn't last long. He picked up the phone and managed to access the notifications. He saw messages at the top of the screen. One said, "Still thinking about what you told me yesterday, you deserve better." Another, "Let me know if you're going out after work. I can pick you up." His heart raced, but his mind felt numb rather than shocked. He'd already expected it. He just didn't know when or how it would be confirmed. The next morning, Bradley didn't mention it. Melissa kept acting naturally, as if nothing was happening. It was like they were both performing in a play with no audience, where the lines no longer mattered. On Saturday, she left saying she had a training session with part of the team. She said she'd be back at night, asked him to heat up dinner, and walked out like she was following routine. He stayed there, sitting, staring at the phone and trying to decide what to do. Hours after she left saying she had training, Bradley found himself pacing the living room, restless, trying to understand how his own house felt stranger than ever. He went to the cupboard, put away a few dishes, then sat on the couch and stared at the turned-off TV. The remote fell to the floor when he accidentally knocked it, and as he bent down to pick it up, he saw something between the couch cushions. It was Melissa's phone. She had forgotten it. For a few seconds, he just held the device, surprised. His heart pounded. It was like fate had placed the truth in his hands, and now it only took courage. Unlocking it was easy, she never changed her password. And there were the messages. The most recent conversations with Brian were open. There were emojis, short voice notes, a selfie she sent from the elevator before leaving. He scrolled slowly, like someone flipping through a painful book. He read confessions, promises, and even one sentence that left him frozen, "With you, I can breathe." In another, she commented on the hotel room, saying the sheets smelled like peace. The screenshot of the reservation was in the photo gallery. Wednesday night. The same day she said she stayed late finishing reports. He didn't need to confirm anything else. That night, Bradley stayed on the couch with her phone still in his hands. He read the messages over and over, trying to understand how they'd gotten to this point. The betrayal hurt, but what hurt even more was the feeling of having been pushed aside long before this happened. The relationship had been broken for a long time. This just confirmed what their silence had been screaming for weeks. Past midnight, he heard the gate open. Melissa came in through the front door in a hurry, holding her bag, clearly surprised to see her phone on the table. Her first reaction was to grab it quickly and ask why he had touched it. He stood up, looked at her with steady eyes, and simply said, "You don't need to pretend anymore." She tried to explain. She said things were confusing, that she felt lonely, that she thought he didn't love her anymore. Bradley didn't respond. He just sat back down and rubbed his face, trying to sort his thoughts. Melissa started crying, saying she didn't want it to be like this, that everything had happened too fast. He listened in silence. When she asked if he hated her, he just said, "I'm just tired." She slept in the bedroom. He stayed in the living room. The sound of the fan was all that could be heard. At dawn, Bradley went upstairs, entered the room without a word, and changed clothes. Melissa opened her eyes and tried to start a conversation, but he was already leaving. He said he'd be out all day, that he needed to think. And he left with just his wallet and keys. He didn't look back. On Sunday morning, he was in a simple hotel room, lying down, staring at the ceiling. His suitcase still open in the corner. He had no plans. He just wanted distance. His phone rang. It was his mom. He answered, trying to sound okay. They talked about small things. She mentioned the cake she was baking, a problem with the gate, a documentary she watched on TV. At the end of the call, she paused and asked, "Is everything all right over there?" He said yes, in a calm tone. Then he said goodbye. But as soon as he hung up, the weight returned. He wished he could have said he was shattered. That he'd seen everything. That the person he shared his life with wasn't the same anymore. But he stayed silent. He set the phone aside, closed his eyes, and felt like he was trying to breathe with only half his chest. He didn't know exactly what came next, but he already saw no way back. Bradley spent 2 days in that hotel room. There was no rush, no motivation. His phone buzzed from time to time, but he already knew who it was. Melissa had called 3 times the first day. Then she started sending messages. Some short, some longer. He read them all. Some started with his name, others seemed like desperate attempts to fix what was already broken. She said she wanted to talk, that she knew she'd messed up, that what happened didn't erase everything they'd lived. In one, she wrote, "You made mistakes too." That made him drop the phone right away. The way some people can flip things around when they're afraid of losing control over someone is almost rehearsed. Bradley didn't reply. He closed the app and started ignoring any new notifications. He thought about how everything had fallen apart. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't just because of Brian. The betrayal was the breaking point, but what led up to it was a long, silent buildup. It was the way she started treating him, like he was an unwanted burden. It was the distant look at dinner, the questions that stopped being asked, the touch that disappeared without a clear reason. Melissa had crossed a line, but she'd already been far from him long before that hotel. He just hadn't seen it because he still believed they were facing a tough phase together. On Tuesday afternoon, Bradley decided to go back home. Not because he'd forgiven her or changed his mind. But because he couldn't stand that space that wasn't his anymore. He needed to get his things, close what was left open, and move on. He took a taxi, got off at the corner, and walked to the door. The key still worked. He opened it slowly, not knowing what he'd find. The living room was tidy. Everything was in place. Melissa had probably gone out. There was a note on the table, "Went to work. When I get back, I hope you're still here. He read it, folded it, and put it in his pants pocket. He started gathering his clothes, documents, personal items. He packed everything into 2 large suitcases. While going through the closet, he found a photo frame with a picture of the two of them, taken on a beach trip years ago. They were laughing, both with sandy feet and sunburnt faces. He held the image for a few seconds. Then he put it back on the shelf. That didn't belong to him anymore. In the afternoon, Melissa came home. She walked in calling his name. When she saw the packed suitcases, she froze. Bradley was sitting on the couch, waiting for that moment. She asked if they could talk. He said yes, but it would be brief. Melissa tried to explain what happened with Brian. She said she was lost, felt lonely, thought their marriage was already dead, and she didn't have the courage to say it. She admitted she was wrong, but also blamed his silence. She said she felt invisible. Bradley listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood up, took an envelope he'd prepared, and handed it to her. Inside were the divorce papers. She looked at them, but didn't say a word. He simply said this was the end. That there was nothing left to fight for. That what she did was the final push into an abyss that had been open for a long time. She started crying. She tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away and said calmly, "You made your choice." Melissa leaned on the table and covered her face with her hands. Bradley pulled the suitcases, walked past the door, and left. That was the last time he saw the inside of that house. In the days that followed, Melissa tried to reach out. She sent messages saying she missed him, that she was sorry, that there was still time to rebuild. He read them all. He didn't reply to any. He moved back temporarily with his mom, started getting his finances in order. The bitterness was still there, alive, but something bigger was emerging, a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe. The pain of separation was real, but the weight of carrying a failing marriage was even heavier. On a random weekend, he went out to buy some basics and ended up walking past a cafe they used to go to together. He saw the place, remembered some conversations, her laugh when she tried the dessert he hated, the mornings when she read the newspaper and he pretended to understand the headlines just to impress her. He smiled for a second. Then he kept walking. It was strange to remember something good in the middle of so much wreckage. But life is like that. Not everything that ends badly started bad. Some stories just lose their way over time. And realizing that helps you move forward. The following Monday, he signed the divorce papers. Melissa didn't show up in person. She sent her lawyer. When the paperwork was finalized, Bradley walked out of the courthouse and stood outside for a few minutes. The world kept spinning like nothing had happened. And in a way, that was freeing. His marriage was over, but his life was just beginning again. Bradley continued living at his mom's house. After the separation, he unpacked his things, settled into his old teenage room, and said he just needed time to get back on his feet. At first, she understood. She made coffee, washed his clothes, asked if he needed help with resumes. But time passed, and that period of reorganization turned into routine. He spent his days scrolling on his phone, said he was looking at job openings, but turned down every offer that came. When his mom asked if he had any interviews lined up, he grumbled that the offers were all bad, that nothing was good enough, that nobody valued what he could do. Once, a family friend got him a temporary job as a warehouse assistant at a distribution company. The pay was modest, the work required physical effort, but it was a chance to start over. Bradley didn't even go to the interview. He said that kind of job was for people with no future. Another time, an opportunity came up to work as a receptionist at a clinic. He claimed it would be humiliating to wear a badge just to write down patient names. He always had an excuse ready, a flaw in the job, a complaint about the salary, a gripe about the distance. The truth was, he didn't want to leave the comfort zone he'd settled into. It was easier to blame the world than to face the mirror. His mom started losing patience. At first, she held back her frustration. Then, she began speaking up louder. Lunches got tense. The tension filled even the silence. One Sunday afternoon, after yet another refusal of a job offer, she exploded. She said she was tired, that he was a grown man living like a guest. She complained that she was covering all the expenses alone while he slept late and spent the day complaining about life. Bradley tried to argue back, but she cut him off. She looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm not kicking you out because you're my son. But honestly, seeing you like this embarrasses me. You've become a failure." He was stunned. He'd never heard his mom talk to him like that. But he didn't say anything. He stood up from the table and locked himself in his room. He stayed there the rest of the day, silent. For the first time, he realized he wasn't even welcome here anymore. But even facing that, he didn't move. He stayed still, waiting for luck to change on its own. Meanwhile, Melissa's life took a completely different path. After the separation, she focused on rebuilding what she'd neglected for years. She worked harder, took online courses, showed up more in meetings. Her co-workers started seeing her as reliable, strong, strategic. 5 months after the divorce, her manager called her in to talk. She walked in thinking she'd get a new task, but walked out as the team coordinator. Her salary tripled. The following week, she cried in the office bathroom. For the first time, from happiness. Even with more money coming in, she kept her routine simple. She paid off debts, helped her parents, traded her old car for a newer one. She rented a better apartment, with more light, more quiet, more peace. And she stayed single. She went on a few dates, nothing serious. Her priority was herself. For the first time in years, she listened to herself, respected herself, felt whole. 2 years later, she closed the deal on the house she'd always dreamed of. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a spacious kitchen where she could cook in peace. She planted lavender by the entrance, hung a new painting in the living room, and bought a chair just for reading. On the night she got the keys, she opened a bottle of sparkling wine, poured herself a glass, and sat alone, looking around that space. She stayed there, in silence. And then she realized. What once felt like guilt, the weight of the betrayal, didn't hurt like it used to. Yes, she'd made mistakes. She'd made choices that hurt people. But there, in that house, with everything she'd built through effort, she understood something she'd never accepted before: Bradley wasn't just a victim. He was also an anchor. Someone sinking and pulling her down with him. For years, she believed she had to save him. But it was her who needed to be free. The separation, though painful, was the turning point. With her glass in hand, Melissa stood up. She walked to the porch, felt the light night air, and smiled. Not out of spite, not for revenge. But from relief. Life had moved on. And now, it was completely hers. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.